Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Safety on the CTA. A judge rules concealed carry guns should be allowed on public transit just days before a mass shooting on the Blue Line.
He's looking downfield, nothing there. Spins away, throws on the move. It is caught!
Woo, and football is back, and expectations are high as the Chicago Bears kick off their season at home. And now to some of today's top stories. Charges are being filed in a mass shooting over the holiday weekend that left 4 people dead in West Suburban Forest Park. 30-year-old Chicagoan Ronnie Davis is being charged with first-degree murder, according to officials, for the Monday morning shooting on a CTA Blue Line train. Officials say the 4 people were shot at close range while they were asleep. Authorities are expected to deliver an update in the case this evening. The University of Illinois is agreeing to make changes to address nearly 140 allegations of mostly anti-Semitic incidents on campus over 8 years. The agreement stems from an investigation from the U.S. Department of Education after a complaint was filed in March 2020. The complaint alleged the recurring appearance of swastikas throughout campus, mezuzahs ripped from student doors, and a brick being thrown through the window of a Jewish fraternity, among other incidents between 2015 and 2023. In a statement today, the university says it does not condone anti-Semitism or expressions of hate against other groups, and that this voluntary resolution reflects the university's commitment. For more on the response from Illini Hillel, please visit our website. Swollen class sizes, not enough language support for new arrivals, and no arts, library, or after-school programming. These are the shortages the Chicago Teachers Union says some members of their union are reporting across the district. The union today launched the Underfunded, Understaffed Tracker that it says is intended to monitor the impact of understaffing and underfunding in CPS schools. CTU says the tracker reports which positions are open at which schools based on data from CPS's own reporting, and argues the district's lack of planning and funding makes the case for a transformative teacher contract. And if you didn't make it out to Chicago's pools or beaches this summer, I'm sorry, you'll have to wait until Memorial Day 2025. The Labor Day weekend was the last splash for the city's 22 beaches and approximately a dozen outdoor pools, which all closed yesterday. Last night, lifeguards posted red no swimming flags on beaches. They remain there until the beaches reopen next summer. Up next, Chicago's police chief says we're seeing a transformation in the department, but reform advocates aren't so sure. Details with our Spotlight Politics team right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Just days before a mass shooting on the CTA Blue Line, a judge rules concealed carry guns should be allowed on public transit. Meanwhile, the presidential campaign kicks into high gear with Governor J.B. Pritzker in New Hampshire campaigning for the Democrats. And Mayor Brandon Johnson grapples with how to handle a looming $1 billion budget gap. Here with all that and more is our Spotlight Politics team, Amanda Vinicky and Heather Sharon. Welcome back, gang. So, as we mentioned at the top of the show, this very shocking local tragedy that's making national headlines. 4 people shot and killed aboard a Blue Line train in West Suburban Forest Park early yesterday. Amanda, CTA recently began using AI technology to detect guns. Tell us about that and the other surveillance tools that are being used to keep public transit safe.
Well, so there are a lot of various ways that you have public transit agencies battling the issue of safety. And so, you know, CTA has their own, Metro has their own. And that's actually something that legislators are talking about as they figure out how to transform the region's public transit overall, which is, you're going to be talking soon about Chicago's budget shortfall that does not include this huge shortfall that Metro pays face and the CTA will be facing come 2026. They have just started using something, it's evidently artificial intelligence that can see when somebody brandishes a gun. So there's supposed to be no face detection, but nonetheless, if you bring it out, they have a whole team that checks out whether that is in fact a gun, and then something can be done about it. And this is technology that is used already at Navy Pier, and actually has been for a couple of years. And according to Navy Pier, they say they're really happy with the technology. Thus far, they weren't able to give me any instances of where it had been used to prevent any sort of activity, but they said often it is more like toy guns or what they're seeing, but they're happy with it and planning to continue.
So also, Amanda, last Friday, a judge ruling that it is unconstitutional in Illinois law that bans concealed weapons on public transit. What are the details of this case?
Well, so Illinois was the last state in the nation to actually come out with a law that spelled out when you could have a gun on your person in public, though it has to be concealed. You need to have a license to have a concealed carry license in order to do that, but you're not allowed to bring it everywhere. So private places can say, no, we don't want you to have a gun here, even if you have that license. Restaurants and public transit is one of them. So again, this is a law that's been in place since 2013, but courts can take their time, and plaintiffs argued that that was unfair because they were not able to protect themselves. They say they want to be able to carry a gun for reasons of self-defense. You have a judge out of Rockford that agreed. The governor was asked about this today, and he says that he sort of hopes and assumes that this is going to be appealed, perhaps all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, because he believes that that is not an understanding of the Second Amendment, but the judge there disagrees. And I spoke with the plaintiff's attorney, who said that right now he doesn't recommend that even if you have a concealed carry license, you still should follow the law. Don't bring it on a train right now because they're still reading through and figuring out next steps. But he said that this is a victory for the Second Amendment, and he believes could be used, maybe not in this horrific crime where 4 people died early Monday after being shot on the Blue Line train, but nonetheless that people might be able to use this for self-defense.
So meanwhile, Republicans not so happy with the route that Illinois House Speaker is taking to overhaul regional public transportation. Map out what's going on for us.
So the House Speaker has gotten into a pattern of developing working groups instead of committees. Committees are things that members of the public and journalists can all follow. We know when the hearings are. We know what happens. Working groups are just legislators sort of meeting behind closed doors, and the Speaker believes that this is an advantageous way because they can have more open discussion, and that leads to compromises. Except right now Republicans are upset because there aren't any GOP members. So where is the compromise? Certainly there is plenty to be discussed. You have feuding is too strong a word, but strong sentiments on the part of legislators that represent the suburbs, even as you have city legislators fighting for more funding for CTA. So again, this huge question about what is the future of public transit in the Chicago region, not just the city, but the entire region. Republicans say they should be included in that discussion, and they aren't.
Heather, Chicago Police Chief Snelling, nothing but praise for how his officers handled themselves during the Democratic National Convention. And in fact, he says that what we're seeing is a, quote, transformation. But you spoke with some police reform advocates who aren't so sure. What did you find?
Well, nobody disagrees that the Chicago police passed the test posed by the Democratic National Convention. There were only 76 people arrested during the protests. There were no incidents of police violence or sort of mass incidents like the kind we saw after the police murder of George Floyd. However, I spoke with police reform advocates who say that's the floor. They should be protecting people's constitutional rights, which we all have to go out and protest. The issue with these protests is that they were planned, they were permitted. Everybody knew when they were going to take place, and they knew where they were going to take place. That is very different than what happened during the summer in 2020, where these protests sort of popped up organically, and the police department and the city sort of had to scramble to respond to them. So those are two very different things. I think everyone is relieved that the city sort of shined on the national stage, and the police department sort of didn't take several steps back in its efforts to reform itself. But there are big challenges that they remain, and perhaps, the proof will be in the daily interactions between Chicago police officers and Chicagoans without 8,000 media cameras there and the international spotlight. That is really what the consent decree is designed to change.
Yeah, how they perform when nobody's looking. Well, when not everybody is looking.
Correct. Well, I'm always looking.
You're
so,
always.
yes.
We know that Heather is always looking. Also at City Hall, Heather, the city is facing that budget shortfall next year, nearly $1 billion. Mayor Brandon Johnson finding himself, of course, between a rock and a hard place. Can he close that gap and keep his campaign promises?
It is not going to be easy because, of course, Brandon Johnson was elected on a platform promising to invest in working class people. It makes it really hard when you have that big of a budget gap. And the other thing that he promised to do was to not raise property taxes. And unfortunately, raising property taxes is the easiest, most effective way for the city to increase revenue to keep pace with those spiraling expenses. How he's going to navigate this will certainly be a major test of what he hopes will be his first term in office.
Yeah, what happened to the people's budget? You remember, like, that is what he called it when he unveiled his first budget, his first year in office.
He says it's still in effect. It's just that there are going to be sacrifices and tough decisions will have to be made. You know, I've talked to some people at City Hall who say this is an opportunity for the mayor to sort of take advantage of this crisis and propose structural reforms, the likes that we really haven't seen. Whether or not he's going to do that, we won't know for about another month and a half.
Okay. Just wrapping up, celebrating a holiday that celebrates workers, everybody. But a new report shows that union participation is actually declining. Amanda, what else did that data show?
So we had researchers, and I should point out that some of this research was done by an organization that does have ties with labor leaders. So want to put that out there. And they've been doing this annual report just kind of gauging the membership in Illinois unions. And they saw that there were you had 4,000 people joining unions, that there were successes as you're seeing, for example, we've reported a lot, our colleague Nick has reported on, Starbucks unionization or the cannabis dispensaries, employees there are joining the labor movement as well. So you're seeing that, and at the same time, a decrease for the first time really in the overall labor participation that could be tied to under the Rauner administration. You had this fight that was taken to the U.S. Supreme Court, and those who didn't want to have to participate in public sector unions are no longer compelled to do so. They don't have to pay what's called fair share fees. So that was really the numbers that they came out with. And I think also interestingly, because you have Democrats who of course are in charge in Illinois government always saying Illinois is the most labor friendly state. This was not measured, but I don't think they're particularly wrong. You have a constitutional amendment that protects the right to unionize, with the exception, by the way, of legislative employees, that's another fight. But that Illinois is the 13th ranked for labor participation. So despite being the most labor friendly, not number one in terms of numbers.
Which, yeah, I think some folks would find that interesting. Heather, far northwest side Alderman Jim Gardner admonished just before the Labor Day holiday by a federal judge. What's up there?
Well, he is in her court because back in 2021, he blocked 6 of his most strident critics from his official Facebook page. And that ran afoul of another decision by another series of federal judges. So this judge, Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman, ruled that he had violated the First Amendment rights of these critics to sort of make their opinions known to him. Now, the Supreme Court ruled on this issue and sort of narrowed that sort of, way you sort of analyze whether that was proper. So he's back in front of her court, but they ran into each other at the June funeral of former Chief Judge Harry Liebenweiber. And apparently Alderman Gardner introduced himself to the judge, which is a no-no. You cannot speak to a judge under federal ethics rules because it could raise questions of an appearance of a conflict of interest. And Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman let him have it in his court on Friday. Now, he wasn't there, but his lawyer was told that that shouldn't have happened and it shouldn't happen again. She is expected to rule in the coming weeks whether he will face a full trial on those allegations of First Amendment violations.
Okay. Amanda, Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker, everybody was happy with how Chicago came out, of course, being in the spotlight, the world spotlight during the DNC. Apparently the Harris Walls campaign was really happy with Governor Pritzker because we know that he is campaigning for them in New Hampshire. Tell me more.
Well, so, I mean, he had been a surrogate for Joe Biden, so there were some sort of questions, even though he said that, yes, I'm fully on board Team Harris now that there is a switch in the nominee. Still, questions. How much would he be doing? I am told by Pritzker's political team that, in fact, this really was a trip that was built around requests from the AFL-CIO that he headlined their Labor Day brunch, so that's why he went out to New Hampshire, and that he'll be making more stops, including this month. We don't know where else he'll be campaigning for the Harris-Walz ticket. Of course, because it is New Hampshire, some people were particularly interested because of that state's very classic role, due to the 68 DNC, by the way, in being the first state for the primaries. That's no longer really the case, but nonetheless raising some eyebrows as to what exactly Pritzker was doing in New Hampshire and whether he's trying to rub some elbows out there in a prominent state for future primaries.
It's usually first. All right, that's Spotlight Gang. Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon. Thanks, everybody. Up next, what to expect from the upcoming Bears season with James Big Cat Williams. Football fans, the wait is nearly over. The NFL regular season is set to kick off this week, and after a disappointing last few seasons, there's excitement brewing once again at Soldier Field. Bears fans are hoping college phenom Caleb Williams will be the franchise quarterback they've long been looking for. It's a lot to put on a rookie quarterback, but so far Williams appears unfazed by the pressure as the Bears prepare for their home opener against the Tennessee Titans on Sunday. Joining us now to share his thoughts, we are delighted to welcome back James Big Cat Williams, who played offensive tackle for the Bears from 1991 to 2002. Good to see you again. Happy football season.
You too. Same to you.
Thank you. Of course, you know, high hopes this season for Bears fans because they've got quarterback Caleb Williams, the #1 overall draft pick. What are your expectations for the team this season?
Well, everything coming out of the locker room is positive. You know, they talk about how polished he is, how mature he is, and just how unfazed by the little things he is. And hearing that come out of the locker room is a good thing. You've had a couple of years of different things floating out of the locker room about the quarterback situation and your quarterback. So it's good to hear everyone on the same page right now, but unless you're really in that locker room, you just don't know.
You don't know what they're saying, right? Is a playoff bid on the table for sure?
I don't think it's for sure, but I do believe they have the pieces to make it work. One good thing about the Bears season this year is the conference games are backloaded, so they're towards the end of the season. So they have an opportunity to work on their craft, to get a little better before they get into the conference games, which maybe week 9, week 10 is the first conference game. So.
Okay. So later into the season. Yeah. A lot of hype, of course, around Caleb Williams. How much can we and how much should we expect from him in his rookie season?
Well, when you pick a guy first overall pick in the draft, you're expecting a lot out of him. You like what you've seen out of him, but you do have to understand that he's young. And he's going to make mistakes. It's about how he learns from those mistakes, how he comes back from those mistakes, how the guys interact with him when he does make those mistakes, because you have a veteran group around him that you have structured to help him. Now, they've got to not only help him with catching the ball, running the ball, scoring touchdowns, but they have to help him when times get hard, and that's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
Do you think improvements have been made on the offensive line to protect him?
I think when that line is healthy, I think that line will be very good. Keeping them healthy is going to be the question. You know, you have two guards that have spent a lot of time on the sidelines in the cold tubs. So interchanging lines is difficult. So, you know, we have to see how healthy they can stay.
All right. Other standout players you're excited about?
I mean, you talk about the people that Poles has brought in. You know, a young Doomsday. to grow with Caleb, a Swift in the backfield to take some of the pressure off of him. You've put a lot of things around a young quarterback to make him successful, as well as, commit the guys that were already here. And you've put together a defense with some players that are top level. You've set the table for him. Now it's just about seeing what they can do with it.
Set the table, now you got to eat. So Bears won all their preseason games. How much can we read into what we saw in the preseason?
Not sure, because you think about how much time the first unit actually played in those games. 50-something plays as a group. So you really don't know how it balances out. I know in '84, we won 4 games during the preseason, ended up winning a wild card game against Minnesota. So it's possible, Like I said, if everything lines up and everyone's able to stay healthy, what they could do could be fun to watch.
Oh, you invoked the '84 team. Yeah, Bears fans are going to get hopeful about that. So how much pressure is Matt Eberflus under as he enters his 3rd season as Bears head coach?
I think it varies because he's under a lot of pressure because you have to do better than the 7-10 season that you had last year. You have a young quarterback. You don't want your young quarterback that everyone's so high on to start off his career with 2 different head coaches, 2 different offensive coordinators. You never know how things like that are going to pan out. So with him calling the defense, with some of the things that they seem to want to run this season as far as the defense goes, I think they'll be able to take some of the pressure off the offense, allow them to score some points. I think he'll be okay. I think they've got to, I think it's going to take a major meltdown for them to get him out here.
Fingers crossed, man. NFC North, it's known as the black and blue division with some intense rivalries. Are we returning to the days of having a competitive division? What do you think?
It's possible. This division is very competitive right now. When you look at Detroit being 1 game away from the Super Bowl, when you look at what Green Bay was able to do with a young quarterback, everybody's got their fingers crossed that he's not the next Favre or, the other guy. But
whose name we shall not say.
We shall not say.
No, not him. What was it? Voldemort. That's his name. Oops, I said it.
This conference is tight. It is very tight. And you just have to hope that with the things that the Bears have put together, they will be ready to compete when the time comes. And, you talk about Minnesota. They're a team that's not too far away either. So it's definitely a competitive division.
So Chicago Bears, the preseason has been the focus of the series on HBO, Hard Knocks, and it's fun for the fans, obviously, right, to get sort of that behind-the-scenes access to your favorite team. But is that sort of a distraction for young players?
I don't think so, because when you talk about young players nowadays, you're talking about kids that have grown up on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, they know all this stuff. They have been attacked before. They have had to either keep quiet or retaliate. So they know how to go about these things. They know how to, some of them know how to act when they're on camera. So it's, I could see, being hard to take that home with you. But around the facilities, you're always on camera at some point in time.
Does it not also sort of give fans, and maybe some fair weather fans, sort of a look at what really goes on behind the scenes at some of the decisions and choices that are made, and get to know the team, the people who are playing the game?
Well, yeah, I think when you're talking about things that are going on in-house, when you're talking about things that are going on in the building, I think it's great for fans. And fans also want to see what these guys do in their off time, what they're doing, in their personal lives. So it's a great look into, I don't know if I could have done it. I'm the get off my lawn guy. I grew up with a cell phone that was as big as a brick when I first came into the NFL.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know you don't.
No, I do. I know.
But, it would just seem like a lot. It would seem like a lot knowing that, every waking moment someone's following you. But like I said, these kids are more used to it.
10 seconds, season opener against the Tennessee Titans this weekend. What kind of game are you expecting?
A close one. I think Tennessee has bolstered their team to see whether or not Will Levis is the guy or not. So I think it'll be a very competitive game.
All right, should be fun to watch. James Big Cat Williams, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this. And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, The Daily Chicagoan, at WTTW.com/newsletter. And while you're there, check out our website for the very latest from WTTW News. And never miss Chicago Tonight, because you can stream us on Facebook, YouTube, and our website. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. As people incarcerated in Stateville Prison begin to transfer elsewhere, a look at what the pending closure means for employees and people held behind the wall. And aside from a transfer, how some people in Illinois prisons are working to secure earlier releases for themselves and other people incarcerated around the state. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is committed to supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives throughout the legal profession.